Is it possible to both hustle hard and also take care of yourself? Can you be a successful entrepreneur by sometimes saying no? How can we give ourselves permission to say no and listen to our bodies without losing our commitment to the grind? Join us as we discuss the answers to these questions and more. Don't skip something twice, friends, and don't skip this episode.
Before we get started with today's show, we've been talking a lot about how we're feeling and topics that we find interesting and important. We want to know what you're feeling, how you're really feeling, and what topics you're interested in and what you want to hear more about. You can send your thoughts to beyondcamp@gocamp.pro and we'll add it to our brainstorming session for season 3 starting in fall 2021.
Welcome to Beyond Camp, where we explore the intersection of camp in our lives. For too long, camp professionals have referred to camp as being in a bubble, and we're here to burst that bubble with you today. We know that camp intersects with every aspect of our lives, and we're excited to delve into those. We are your hosts, Rachel Kent. My pronouns are she, her,
And I'm Cassie Bloy. My pronouns are also she, her.
and we're here to go beyond camp with you. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today, and be sure to check out the show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Now, let's get started. Today we have sort of a unique topic for you. We're going to dive into the topic of a piece of advice that I was given recently by a friend of mine and a connection that I made through the Alt MBA. And the piece of advice comes from my friend Dan McLinn, and it is don't skip something twice. And that piece of advice really has resonated with me as we have rounded the corner entering year 2 of the pandemic. And I know that that's a scary thought for folks. But this piece of advice, don't skip something twice. He gave it to me. We sort of meet weekly, a group of us, and we were chatting, and folks were getting busy, but we were still pretty committed to this group, even though people had to miss it some weeks. But there was a thread of connectivity through all of us. And he said, something that I always tell myself is don't skip something twice. So if I'm really busy this week, that's fine. I can hit pause. I'll send everyone an email and be like, you know what, I'll catch up with you next week. But then I make sure that I go that next week so that I don't fall out of the habit of making this connection with this group of people. And I just felt like that was really applicable now as we all try to balance sort of this idea of hustling and uh, self care all at the same time. And I think in the past, it's been easier to push self care to the side. But the weight of the pandemic and the world on us, I think it's becoming just a little bit harder than it used to be, if not a lot harder. Matthew, what comes to mind when I say to you, don't skip something twice?
It's okay to miss it today, but not tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I'm thinking, like, skipping a meal. Don't skip lunch one day if you regularly eat lunch. If you skip it, that's okay if you can have enough snacks. But
Don't take Cassie's dietary advice here. We're talking to
yeah,
Cassie, who's in the midst of a very busy season, this is great advice for camp directors. If you
yeah,
miss something, a meal because you're running about camp, make up for it
don't miss.
quickly. But this is not diet advice.
Yeah,
Let's be clear on that.
thank you, Rachel. Yes, it's just a really clean example of like if you skip one meal, don't skip the next meal because you're going to get hangry.
Mm, yes, I mean I get hungry after skipping one meal, but that is sound advice.
Me too, but not everybody does.
That's fair. I also think of it in terms of like if you were training for a race, if you're taking up running and one day you're like, oh, my body is tired, I need to take a break, and you skip one day, but the next day get into it because I think it's much harder to get back into something once you've skipped it twice.
I think so. It's part of that building a habit, right?
Hmm.
If we have a habit built and then we skip it once and then we skip it twice, I'm out. That's it. That habit's done for me.
Yes, that's fair. And I think like how they say it takes what 21 days to build a new habit.
They do, but there's a lot of research on that one.
Okay,
Read
so
Atomic Habits fills that blank in for everybody out there.
perfect. So we'll say at minimum 21 days, right?
Yeah.
That's usually like generally understood. So let's talk about habit building for a second. So sometimes I find it stressful because people are like, you got to do it for 21 days in a row. Like, let's say I'm going to take up walking every morning, um, which I do because I pay for it if I don't take the dogs. But let's say I wanted to take this up and I'm like, okay, I have to walk every day for 21 days. If I miss a day, I'm the kind of person who's like, well, there it goes. Like, I'm done. I can't form this habit. I'm going to have to start all over again. And I find that really challenging. So I think that don't skip
Yes.
something twice gives you a little bit of grace in terms of like life is going to happen. You're not going to get to something 21 days in a row, and that's okay.
maybe that's the problem, that we're not accepting of our mistakes or our misses.
Hmm. And when I say don't skip something twice, I don't mean that means consecutively,
Yeah.
not two times ever. Like you have like two strikes, then you're out kind of thing. Like we're not rewriting baseball here or anything. Um, Heather Davidson is listening. She's gonna love my baseball reference. Apparently, it's spring training season for those of you who listen to or watch sports.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm really thinking of like it is. It's, you know, once you miss it twice, back to back is when it really is impactful. It's, if you miss it once on week 1 and once on week 3, is that a it's going to have a different impact.
Absolutely, and I think that having that mindset, if we can skip something because our body requires rest, because our family is demanding our attention, because life is just really hard, that's going to make achieving new goals and starting new habits seem way more achievable, and way more realistic, I think, and far less scary.
I think so, and I think it gives us a chance to really reflect on, what's important in the moment versus the bigger picture, because sometimes we need to break things down to the smaller pieces of what do I need to be human right now.
Hmm. And I think it also allows us to reflect on like, why are we doing things? Are we doing things for ourselves or for other people? And if we're doing them for other people, why? It's something that I was thinking about in the last couple of days. Is I pride myself on getting up early in the morning. I try and get up at 5:45 every morning. I have like a solid morning routine. I can get some things done before I start the day. But I've been feeling tired lately for a variety of reasons, as many of us are. And so last night I was like, you know what? I'm going to sleep until 7, because my body needs that. And I think this idea of not skipping swing twice made me think about like my body actually needs this extra hour and a bit of rest. So let me give myself that so that I can have this break. And also, why am I waking up at 5:45? Is it because I enjoy it or because I'm trying to prove something to the world? And the world does not care what time I'm getting out of bed. Let me tell you, there's definitely people listening to this podcast right now who's like, Rachel, what is wrong with you? Why would you be getting up that early? And honestly, I don't blame you folks.
Yeah, so I think that's so important. You have to do what's right for you, not because this book said so or that podcast said so or that that's the new trend. You need to do what's right for you.
Hmm.
And I think that we need to honor what's right for ourselves more often.
Yes. I also think that the idea of not skipping something twice also allows you to still have that like kind of hustle mindset. Like, okay, I'm going to skip something, but then I'm going to get back at it.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Cassie, what does hustling mean to you?
To me, it sounds like just doing all the things, like hustling hard to get the job done at a pace that's, maybe faster than expected, but also like my brain goes, side hustle. How many side hustles could I have? Do
Hmm.
I have too many side hustles?
I think if you're asking yourself that, the answer is yes.
I should answer yes.
Yeah, I think when we talk about hustle, that's a term that's thrown around a lot of like entrepreneurial circles.
Mhm.
But it's also really applicable to camp pros who are just trying to get things done, make a name for themselves, build their
Yeah.
brand. Um, like hitting the grind, just trying to get things done. And I think sometimes it can be empowering to be like, yes, like I'm hustling, I'm getting things done. But I also think it can be really dangerous.
Yeah, I think we would have to watch that because, like, I think especially as camp pros, if I think back to like those days where I was really pushing to get all the stuff done, I don't think I was taking care of me. I was taking care of doing a good job. I was taking care of my people. I was making sure everybody had what they need, but my needs weren't being met.
Absolutely. And I think it's a dangerous thing because there's just this mindset that like you can hustle, 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 and you don't take a break. And if you're not quote unquote hustling, getting all the things done, working 1,000 side jobs,
Hmm.
that you're not good enough, that you're not going to achieve anything. Um,
Yeah.
and that's, I think, really scary and really dangerous. Um, People typically don't have the capacity to work, one full-time job and 6 side hustles without taking a break for years on end. Like it just isn't sustainable, and it also doesn't allow you any balance in your life.
Yeah. And I think we've all, if you've listened to many of our podcasts, you've probably heard us talk about balance and the importance of, managing that balance and taking care of it and figuring
Hmm.
out what's important and how what's important to you is part of who you are.
Absolutely. And I think the hustling mindset sort of really reached a peak for me uh, early on in the pandemic when most folks were locked down. And this idea of like quarantining, lockdown, self isolating was sort of like new and novel. Um, Anybody else get in their like Instagram and Facebook memories from like a year ago? And you're like, oh, yes, back when it was like a novel thing that I got to spend all this time with the people around me. And now you're like, I am over it. We're on like month 17, it feels like.
Oh,
Um, Anyways, back from that tangent. There were Instagram points or posts out there that said something like, if you don't come out of lockdown with like a new side hustle and a new skill and a new blah blah blah, then like
oh,
you've wasted your time. Um, and in some respects, that spoke to me because I was like, yes, you should take advantage of this time. Like, what can I do? Like, what books can I read? What new hobby can I take up? And there's lots of folks who've done those things. But there's also the reality that like, whoa, this is really tough. Um,
yeah.
I shouldn't swear on the podcast probably, so I'll keep that to myself. But like, this is tough stuff. um, and it's okay to not do those things. So I think that's where the hustling mindset can get dangerous
Mm.
because social media portrays it as this thing that we just like have to keep doing all the time.
Yeah, well, and when it hits social media, it becomes that comparison and everybody trying to one up another person. How much are they doing? Am I doing what they're doing? Because, like, I think, especially as females, there's that mindset that we're always taught to, like, that's kind of ingrained through the media. We want to look like and do like all these other people. And we have to fight that social construct that exists to be independent and know what's right for us so that we can hustle, and that's okay, but we need to know how much can we hustle.
Hmm. To be clear, I don't think that we're saying that you shouldn't hustle because I have a lot of respect for folks who are running side gigs, who are doing a bunch of things. I mean, here we are doing a podcast, I think, both of us, for different reasons, but part of which is to build our personal brand and to give back to the community,
Hmm.
and to be connected. Um, well, we have our full-time jobs and we serve on boards and we do all these other things. So I think we both have a lot of respect for the hustle.
Oh
I
yeah.
think we just want there to be a realistic viewpoint to it.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Like, we just need to, and maybe that has to come with setting expectations with everything that you do, and that you know what's expected of you and what people and what you expect of other people in each role that you complete.
Hmm. One of the reasons why I like the idea of don't skip something twice is because it still allows me to hold myself to a high standard. It
Hmm.
allows me to stay committed to something. Sometimes this is going to be a contentious thing that I'm about to say, I think. Uh,
Do
Sometimes I
it.
worry that when I am like, oh, I need more self-care, I need more self-care, that I'm allowing myself to not do something. That it makes it easier for me to make excuses for myself because I'm like, well, I'm too tired to get this done. Oh, I'm too
Yeah.
stressed. Oh, I'm whatever. And I make a lot of excuses for myself. Let me tell you, if anybody's ever like, oh, I need an excuse for why I shouldn't do something, call me up. I've got lists of them. I will hook you up.
I can help you out with those too.
They're like not even excuses that I give to anybody. They're just in my head. And so it's
Yeah.
easy for that internal monologue to become one of excuses. Well, I should take care of myself, which is absolutely true. I should.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of don't skip something twice allows me to still hold myself to a really high standard to be like, okay, great. Today we're going to be intentional about self care, Rachel. We're going to take the evening off and not work on anything else. We're going to lay on the couch with the dogs or do whatever it is that I want to do for
Hmm.
myself. But tomorrow, you're going to do that thing that you said you were going to do. And I need that to keep myself some form of disciplined as I can be during a global pandemic.
Yeah, I see it. I'm like, yeah, I make those same excuses. It's that self-talk of like, it's okay. I can do it tomorrow. Right.
Hmm.
I can do that self-care thing at this time. I should, connect with my family. It's okay. They know I'm busy. I'm working, whatever. It's fine. They know I work. They know it's busy. It'll be okay. I can take care of that later. And I think we need to recognize it, call ourselves out on it.
Hmm. There's been really
And
popular.
there's something else that I think we should do, but I don't know what it is yet.
Okay, well, when you come back to us, we'll do another episode on that. There's been a really popular meme going around recently about how you put off something that could take 15 minutes, but you're going to spend like 15 days, weeks, months, like stressing about it before you do that
Yeah.
like really simple task. And I'm the king of doing that, let me tell you.
Yeah. There's
Anyways.
there's some simple tasks sitting around that I've let get, out of hand too. It's normal.
Hmm.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick pause here, and when we come back, we are going to dive into the duality of hustle and self-care and really explore that. Stay tuned.
Camp has played a pivotal role in the lives of many, and for the first time, camp pros are faced with innumerable new challenges in preparing for 2021 and their off-season programming. It's an unprecedented year, a unique year, and a challenging year all rolled into one. The challenges facing the camp pro can feel insurmountable at times, but you aren't alone. Camp pros can count on ACA Illinois to care for them, support them, and help them through this challenging time. They're here for camp pros to help them find their way through the months ahead. As we look towards summer 2021 and the seasons in between, we know we can count on ACA Illinois to be there for us. The American Camp Association Illinois is dedicated to supporting the camp professionals and helping them navigate how to move forward. From webinars to training to resources on mental health, they truly are there for camp pros. Discover more about their work at acail.org.
So we're going to dive back into this duality of hustle and self-care. And I think that duality has been something that's really been on my mind for whatever reason. It seems to be a common thing that folks in some of my circles have been talking about. But me, don't skip something twice really balances that hustle and self-care piece and allows you to have both. And I think sometimes that's what Instagram and TikTok misses is this idea that you can take good care of yourself and also hustle really hard and get a lot of stuff done and get after your goals.
Yeah, I don't see why you can't do both. I think you need to be intentional about how you do both and you need to set those boundaries. But it's more than okay to have both and to do both. I don't I don't think you can do one without the other long term.
But I think perhaps that's what social media tells us, though, is that you
Yeah.
either have one or the other, that you don't have both. And perhaps it's because duality doesn't make for great open rates or click rates or whatever in people's marketing.
Mhm.
Because it's a friend of mine said, marketing is all about polarizing people, Rachel, or polarizing topics. Um, I'm not a marketing expert. Don't come at me. I'm probably really um, doing a bad job of paraphrasing what she said. But I think it's true. It's like Instagram puts out like these really bold statements, like, reject the hustle. It's all about taking care of yourself. Or it's all about the hustle. If you're not getting up at 4 a.m. and only sleeping 3 hours
Yeah.
a night, then like, what are you doing with your life? Uh, and I think that that's dangerous.
Well, and I think you see it especially in like influencer stories, right? They're either stories about them doing their job and working, or they're stories about them only doing self care
Hmm.
or doing the self care that neither of us are huge fans of.
Yeah, like sometimes I'll see somebody and they'll be like, oh, I had to take the day and I got Starbucks for breakfast and then I had a bath and then I did all these things. And that's wonderful. I'm glad that you can do all those things. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with that. But I cannot just wake up and decide that I'm not going to do my job. And there's a huge amount of privilege in being able to do that. And a lot of folks don't have that ability for a whole wide range of reasons. You have to wake up, you have to go to your job,
Yeah.
or you have to go out and chase leads or produce content because you need to pay rent. And that's very valid. And it doesn't mean that you're taking bad care of yourself.
Hmm. And you need to take care of yourself. You just need to do it in a way that works for you and lets you do what you need to do every day as well.
Mhm. So, can you be an entrepreneur without hustling 24/7, Cassie?
Sure. Why not?
Do you think that's what social media says though? Because I think sometimes,
No. Social media totally says you need to just hustle all the time and work super hard to be an entrepreneur and that you can either be an entrepreneur or you can not be an entrepreneur and be on your like work for somebody else.
mhm. I think what I like about the idea of not skipping something twice is it allows you to be really intentional about your self-care. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that a little bit earlier, and that it allows you to sort of take space and be like, okay, I'm not going to whatever it is today. So let's say I have a weekly meeting with this group of people. And I'm like, nope, like this week I'm gonna miss it. Okay. if I'm going to miss it, what am I going to do in its place? Am I missing it because I'm tired and I need to get some sleep, or I need to spend some time outside, or spend some time with the dogs? Okay, great. I'm going to do that. Or maybe it's because I need to catch up on work. Also
Mhm.
valid, because sometimes that is good self care to just check some things off a list to move on. Um,
Definitely.
but then next week, I'm going to be sure to go, and it keeps you on track. And I think that it allows for that duality, which is really important. So it allows you to keep sort of like your life and things happening while also
Mhm.
recognizing that you're committed to whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I really like how you worded that. It's that those are the words I'd like to say.
Great. Okay. So I wrote in our notes here why this is the best piece of advice I've received in the last year. And I'm sure we've received a bunch of advice during the pandemic. And advice that you received during a pandemic is a funny thing, because we've talked about this before, that some of it's really empathetic and wonderful, and some of it is far less empathetic. And you're like, oh no, you just don't get it. You're not holding space for my emotions. Um, but to me, this is just a really great piece of advice, because it has reminded me that I can chase my goals, I can get after what I want. Um, that success isn't guaranteed in that, but that I can get after those things, but that I can also take a break and take a pause during what is arguably one of the hardest collective years of our lives. Um, and that's not to say that people haven't had hard years before, but collectively, this is one of the hardest years for society, I think,
Mhm.
in our lifetimes, probably, just about.
Yeah, I would say so. I think so. And like, as this is the first time I've heard this advice, was literally what, half an hour ago, maybe a week ago, and Rachel was like, let's do this topic. And I was like, yeah, sounds great. Let's do the thing. And she explained it to me before we started. And it's really good advice. Like, just don't skip something twice.
So, why does it resonate with you, Cassie?
Because I skip things twice far too frequently. And I'm like, huh, as I think back and reflect on things that I have skipped twice consecutively, I'll add that word in. What would have happened if I hadn't skipped those twice?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Would I have remembered to bring lunch to work yesterday? Probably. Did at some point a month ago I stopped making my lunch the night before? Yep. Did I forget lunch because I got a quick call and had to run? Just grabbed my lunch kit and ran? You sure did. So, like, a small change can make a big impact. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we can remember that it's okay to skip something, but pick it back up and keep moving, I think we can do ourselves a favor.
I agree. I also like it because it makes situations less awkward. If you have something that you're part of with a group, and for many of us that might be virtual right now.
Mhm.
Um, if you miss something for a week, you're like, oh, like I have to take this meeting off or this time away, whatever it might be. But I'll see you next week. It keeps us connected. But once you start to miss something for like 2 weeks or two like repeats of it, then it's
Yeah.
like awkward to join. And then that's one of the things that at least stops me from rejoining, because I'm like, oh, the group has progressed in whatever it is, book
Mhm.
club, running club, support group, whatever it might be. I'm like, oh, now it's awkward. Are they going to remember me? Should I just not go? And now I'm at 3 times, and I'm at 4 times. And I'm like, I'm not even part of this group anymore. I'll just like skip.
Yeah. And that's super easy to do, I think, especially with something that's weekly,
Mhm,
because that consecutiveness isn't right away. It's
mhm.
7 days out. And that can be easy to look at and go, oh, well, that only happens once a week. I don't need to do that. It'll be okay. I can catch up next week.
Absolutely. And you lose any forward momentum you had as well. Like I think
Yeah.
about where um you're going to the gym. I was big into CrossFit pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
Which I realized I don't talk about nearly as much because I haven't been going to the gym during the pandemic, and we moved, which probably makes me a bad CrossFitter, because if you know any CrossFitters, that's all they talk about is CrossFit. Today, a coworker of mine said, well, I've known you for like 4 months, so this is really the first time you've mentioned CrossFit. And I was like, oh my goodness, they're going to judge me for not talking about it all the time. But maybe that's why I've made more friends, because I don't talk about it.
I think there's other reasons too.
Anyways, CrossFit aside, like I think about when I used to go, and like there would be days where I would miss it. I'd be like, like for whatever reason, I can't go to the gym tonight. Um, but that made it easier to not go again the next day. And then if I skipped 2 or 3 days, and I was like, well, next week maybe. And then I'd be like, oh, it's awkward. Now the coaches are going to be annoyed or like upset that I haven't been back. I'm going to have to explain why. Now I just won't go.
Yeah.
And I did keep going back, but it like that momentum of going quickly switches to not going, and then that ball starts rolling, and that ball always seems to roll a little bit faster than the positive momentum you had going.
Yeah, because I would say it's out like usually there's some sort of either internal external conflict that is associated with that not doing of something that takes care of yourself in the long run, and it becomes like a bigger ball and bigger things roll downhill faster.
That's true. Thanks for the physics lesson, Cassie. I appreciate
No
that.
problem. Like there's a concept there.
Oh, there is. Physics was never my thing. Um, so let's talk about FOMO, fear of missing out. I feel like FOMO is a commonly used term in the camping world often. But when I say it in
Yeah.
other circles, people are like, what are you talking about, Rachel? We
Yeah.
talk a lot about skipping something when we already are inclined not to go.
Mhm.
But I think that there's sometimes where instead of a heart saying to us, you really need to not go, like I'd rather be doing something else. Um, Logically, we know we shouldn't go to something because we're
Yeah.
exhausted, because we have other commitments, because maybe our time would be better spent doing something else. But we want to go because we just have this intense fear of missing out, that intense FOMO.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes it's better to say, I need to miss it this time. Like maybe you and your friends have a weekly wings night and you need to skip it. This is maybe more applicable when you're not in a pandemic, but I know folks are in different stages of reopening around the world. Um, and maybe you need to skip it that week because you have other commitments that have come up.
Mhm.
How do you cope with that FOMO, Cassie?
That's a hard one because it's like the fear of missing out on something good that sounds more social. And social has been a struggle for about 6 years.
Hmm.
Hmm. So it's really hard for me to say, but when I'm thinking about it, like maybe I would look at it as like skipping a conference because those were like things I really looked forward to because they were social outlets as well. I didn't want to miss them.
Mm-hmm.
And not for multiple reasons because I got to connect with friends, I got to see certain people, connect with my peers, all of that. And as much as I didn't like sometimes the 16-hour drive I had to commit because it was cheaper to drive than it was to fly. Yeah. Um, I lived very far away from like everybody else and where things were held.
Apparently.
So, you know, that sucked that I had to do that, but I would rather do that than miss out on the
Mm-hmm.
event. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense? I don't
It,
know.
it totally
I think
does.
I
I
talked in
think,
a circle.
but I think that you also have FOMO in terms of saying yes to things. Like you say yes
Oh
to things
yeah.
all the time,
I say yes
social
way
or
too
not.
much.
Yeah, because you just want to do things. And I think that that's FOMO.
Yeah.
She's like, oh man, if I don't say yes to this, what am I going to
What are the
like miss out
consequences
on?
or actions going to be?
Yeah, we're gonna do a little bit of a mini pod on saying yes. I think in the future, I'll work it into another one because Cassie and I've had some pretty big pivotal yes moments where we said yes to something that's led to many things, including this podcast. But
Yeah, you should hear it next week.
there you go. Next week, tune in. Um, Thank you, Cassie, for always keeping us organized. But I
No
think I
worries.
have that same mindset that's don't skip something twice, that when opportunities are presented, if I'm going to say no to something at one point, do I say no the next time or do I try and strike a balance there as well? How can I apply this don't skip something twice to
Hmm.
both of these, like to a variety of situations? Um, I think the same thing about like meetings sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, if I have a meeting that like is a repeating thing, whether it be weekly or monthly,
Hmm.
um, sometimes you have to say no because you just have other priorities. And sometimes I'm like, no, no, like I'll make it work. I'll just get up earlier. I'll work later
Hmm.
because I don't want to miss out. For me, that fear of missing out often comes from a place of like, I want to prove myself. And I want to prove my worth. And if I'm not there, I'm missing out on the conversation. I'm missing out on this chance to be a part of a decision making
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So,
I really hear it now more a little bit like, yeah, I, And it makes me think of the by saying yes to this, what am I saying no to question.
Hmm.
Um, if you know, I think it's the 7 coaching habits. Um, I think that's one of the questions. I might be wrong. It might just be my brain today. Honestly, it's just like going a mile a minute. But by saying yes, what am I saying no to? And really being intentional with like, if I'm choosing this, that means I can't choose this. Or
Hmm.
by not choosing this, that means I can choose this, right? You can inverse it as well. And really recognizing and being, you know, recognizing what you're choosing and what that means.
Hmm. So as we sort of come to the end of our time together, Cassie, how does not skipping something twice, how does this piece of advice fit into your life? How are you going to work it into your life at all moving forward? Do you think it has a
It
place in your life?
it is going to earn a sticky note with Sharpie on my wall, which is where I put important things. There's a whole bunch above my desk of like just key things that I want to remember. And I think if it's visual and I can see it, so it'll probably end up on my wall at home, then excuse me, it'll help.
I love that. I think for me, not skipping something twice gives me permission to take care of myself. It gives me permission to say, I'm going to miss this today so I can be intentional and listen to my body and listen to my needs. But I am committed to whatever it is, my goal, the people, the project, and I will get to it tomorrow. And so I am going to use Don't Skip Something Twice as a way to stay committed while also taking care of myself and giving myself a little bit of grace um, when building new habits. And also, I'm hoping that it allows me to go after new habits and build new habits in a way that seems less scary or less all or nothing. So, folks, we would love to hear from you about how not skipping something twice fits into your life and how it will fit into your routines. And once again, a huge thank you to my good friend Dan McLean for giving me this piece of advice and launching this podcast episode for us.
Awesome. So, thank you everyone for joining us beyond camp. We hope that you were able to connect and reflect with us as we journey beyond the property lines and bring camp with us. As we wrap up, we want you to be able to reach out and connect with us. You can reach myself, Cassie, at cassie.bloy@stefanricard.ca. Rachel?
Folks are always welcome to send me an email at kentar@girlguides.ca.
Please remember to check out our show notes for any information that we may choose to add there today for you. And you can find those at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. We'd also like to give a big shout out today to the team at Go Camp Pro for holding space for this conversation, to ACA Illinois for their sponsorship and support of us talking every week together. I don't know, somebody thought it was a good idea and they
We're
like
very
it.
we're very grateful for that.
Yes. And to our producers, Matt and Jotham, for editing out my coughing every week. And to you, our listeners, your dedication allows us to keep moving forward. Beyond Camp is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Go well and safely, friends. We'll see you next week.